Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jack Farmer. He's Andy Rossi. This is the Evolution of Movie Show. Thank you so much for joining us. Andy Rossi, we've got a great show today. A little different than usual, but how are you doing before we get started?
I'm doing great. And, happy belated birthday, buddy.
Thank you. It's going to be even more belated once this episode goes up. There's nothing better than getting older, I tell you what. So I'm excited about this movie. This is one that is different than what a lot of our other movies are on this show. So it should be fun to get to go back and review it and take a look at it. But before we get started, we have a guest, Andy. We always bring a guest on, and this week it's no different. We are bringing on with us DJ and actor. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Zooz. Zooz, how are you?
I'm good. Can you guys hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, we can hear you. We hear I see the at General Zooz as I made a joke about Khan coming in. General Khan. This is all playing together perfectly, Zooz. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw you guys have your cool handles displayed, so I thought I might as well plug in my stuff too.
Yeah, might as well.
Now there are literally tens of people who know where to follow you online. But thanks for being on. Now you are a DJ and an actor. What do you got cooking these days? What are you working on?
What am I working on? Well, August is going to be a bit of a busy month. I have a gig in Minneapolis,
that's cool.
which is a reggae gig. I play a lot of reggae music, so that should be fun. First time in Minneapolis. In terms of film, I have a commercial in San Francisco, which I'm looking forward to. And then I am doing some Shakespeare at Val Kilmer's studio at the beginning of August. We just founded a little theater group at his studio. It's called the Witty Fools. So if you guys are around in LA at the beginning of August, come and check me do some Shakespeare.
That's amazing.
Val Kilmer's studio.
Talk about range. Yeah, the DJing, the reggae, the Shakespeare, the commercial stuff. Man, you're doing it all. Thank you for taking the time to come on our little show and chat about some movies.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
For people who are new to the show, this is the Evolution of Movies. And what we do is we watch a movie, but then we talk about it book club style. But we call it the Evolution of Movies because we always pick a movie that came out 1 year after the last movie we watched. So we started in 1980, then we went to 1981, 1982. Now we're all the way up to 2003, a time when movie theaters were filled with the hits like Once Upon a Time in Mexico, Master and Commander, Far Side of the World, and of course, Dumb and Dumberer. But we aren't talking about any of those. We're talking about Mystic River, a movie IMDb describes as the lives of three men who were childhood friends are shattered when one of them has a family tragedy. This one was a little bit more serious of a movie than ones we usually review here on the show, but I'm really glad we got to get back into it. But Zooz, my question for you first and foremost, I ask all the guests, had you seen this movie before, and what were your thoughts going into it this time around?
I had seen it before, many years ago. And then when you guys said this was the movie that we'd be discussing, I was super excited because I remember really being affected by it. I think it's a pretty deep movie. And I remember, I guess that was almost 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I remember being pretty I don't want to say disturbed, but definitely it affected me in a way. And I was excited to revisit it and see if it still kind of elicited the same reaction from me. Yeah.
Now, something we like to do with this show is we like to do a little game to kick things off. And Andy is going to try to guess the Rotten Tomatoes score. And he's going to guess it. And then you have to guess, Zooz, whether or not you think the actual score is higher or lower than what he predicts. All right. So, Andy, this one, as you know, was a big movie at the time, got a lot of award attention. But what does Rotten Tomatoes say about Mystic River?
Just for a little context, Zooz, our last movie we did this with was The Scorpion King. So just my brain is a little all over the place.
We went Scorpion King to Mystic River.
Yeah. So I'm trying to be like, okay, that movie, I think it was in the 40s. So I would say Mystic
shockingly
River.
High, by the way.
Mystic River, spoiler alert, quite a bit better than The Scorpion King. It was really good. And but at 2003, it had to compare against Dumb and Dumberer. So what a challenge there. I gotta say, these acting performances are amazing. So just that alone, I would think would be very high. But in critics like Clint Eastwood, typically, I'll say I'm gonna go big here. I'm gonna go. This got a 90.
A 90%, the upper echelon, making it one of the higher ranked movies that we have watched, if Andy's correct. But Zooz, do you think the actual score is higher or lower than 90%?
That's a tricky one because, I mean, it's got to be higher. It's got to be about 90 or 92 because honestly, like they won a lot of awards for it. Clint Eastwood, like you said, and I don't know what else was like made that year or around that time that was kind
Dumb
of
and
like
Dumberer.
Dumb and Dumberer.
What was the other one you said? Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Once Upon a Time in Mexico and
amazing.
Master and Commander, Far Side of the World.
I don't even. Is that Russell Crowe?
Yeah. They must have got paid per letter they used because that's the longest movie title I've ever heard in my life.
I might even go for 92.
92 is the guess.
Yeah, so I think it might even be a little higher than what Andy said.
Rotten Tomatoes has it at 88%.
Oh,
so
okay.
not quite in the 90s. You know, when I pulled this up, I thought it was going to be like a 95 because this one, I remember being known as just being like one of those movies that everybody was raving about. Critics everywhere loved it, but 88% is what it comes in at.
Interesting. Okay.
This movie
still good. Still good.
This movie is a perfect example of why I like doing this show, is because I saw this movie when it came out, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't get it. And I think looking back, I was at an age where I didn't have the, I guess, emotional maturity to really appreciate some of the things that the characters were going through in this movie. And speaking of, I think something that aged well is I didn't appreciate how past trauma can not only affect someone, but how people view that person.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things are kind of what this movie is about. And being able to go back and see it now, before I was like, I didn't really get it. A lot of people loved it. I wasn't really that into it. But looking back on it now, I loved this movie. I thought it was fantastic. Now being able to go back and kind of understanding or appreciating the weight of some of the topics and the things.
Better than Scorpion King?
I mean, not quite. Let's not get crazy. You know, the Scorpion King is a cinematic classic, but yeah, this was a really, really good movie. And I had a lot of those, so-and-so is in this movie.
Yeah.
It was hard to see, what was the actress's name who she's in Ozark?
Laura Linney. She just got a star on the Walk of Fame yesterday.
She is a sneaky, like, aging like a vampire person, because she looked like that movie was filmed, like, it looks like that movie was filmed like 2 years before Ozark, not 20 years before Ozark.
That's true, yeah.
Crazy. The whole time I was like, she's gonna try to be evil, though. I'm watching this movie.
Well, she was kind of evil.
Well, yeah. That's as we get to the end, yeah, we definitely shows her true colors. But let's get into the movie. As always, I like to give a shout out to everyone who is watching the show on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Always appreciated those likes, those comments, those shares, those subscribes, those 5-star reviews. We haven't had a 5-star review in a while. Give us a 5-star review. I may read your 5-star review on the air, but I won't read a 4-star review or lower. If you give me a 4-star review, you're out of here. You're disowned by the Evolution Movies.
We should probably read if we get a 1-star. That'd be interesting. They're like, we hate you guys.
Don't tempt them, Andy.
We'll take 5s and 1s.
They're gonna do it. They're gonna do it, Andy.
Hey, any publicity is good publicity.
Well, let's talk about this movie. Back in the old days, some kids are playing, and one of them is a mischief maker, talking about stealing cars and writing their names in concrete, when a man who presents himself as a cop stops them and says he's going to take one of them back to tell his mom what a bad kid he's been. It wasn't a cop, however, and the kid is imprisoned in a basement and abused before escaping back home. Back in the present time, 2003, Dave tells his kid about how he used to play ball, having flashbacks after seeing his half of a name written in the concrete. Jimmy is dealing with a kid of his own, the daughter who wants to go on a date with a boy he doesn't like, and Sean is now a cop whose wife left him. Zooz, I always like to start off the reviews here with the guest, and I always like to ask, tell us about the characters of this movie and the world that they live in.
Well, it's set in Boston in an Irish neighborhood. And the 3 characters are Irish. and kind of starts off, like you said, with them as children, and then you kind of see them as adults where they're not, I guess, close friends anymore. They've kind of all gone their separate ways, and they're all leading different lives. Different things are happening. One is a liquor store owner, one is a cop, and what is the other one?
I don't
I
know
don't
if
think
we
they
know what
really
he
talk about what
does. Yeah.
David
They don't
does.
really talk about it, but they've basically gone their three separate ways, and then this incident that takes place kind of brings them all back together, and they're forced to face each other, and then also, I guess, the events that took place when they were kids as well, all over again.
Andy, it's interesting as we watched this movie, I talked about how I kind of viewed it differently as an adult. And I remember as a kid, I'm watching this, and I was probably closer to the age of the kids at the time that I first saw this, where now I'm closer to the age of the adults. And just seeing this guy pull up and acting like a cop, in my mind, I'm screaming at these kids, get away from this dude. It was such a tense thing to watch, and they did so much with really so little in telling the story of these kids as children.
Yeah, I didn't really remember this movie too well. I know I'd seen it before, but I definitely I didn't like recall the exact story. I mean, things were coming to me later, but I didn't remember this beginning scene. But it's pretty tough to watch actually, and it's so creepy the way the guy finds out, oh, you live close by, so that's going to be an issue. You live close by, so that's going to be an issue. Oh, you live far away. Okay. Like it's so hard to watch these two adults like take advantage of these young boys. And it's just, I kind of put myself in that position. I definitely was probably one of those kids that was out, doing stuff like that, writing my name in the sidewalk. And I'd probably be scared if some guy came up and I thought it was a police officer. You respect police officers when you're a kid. So you'd probably be like, oh, okay, I'll go. So it just really hit me. I'm just like, man, this is really intense and tough. And yeah. And of course, we see what happens to Dave as he gets older. And now he's all messed up. And it's like this because of those two assholes that wanted to, be assholes, to say the least. And, now the guy's messed up for life. It's sad.
Yeah, and Zooz, you mentioned it as they grew up. They're obviously not friends anymore. They've separated, but all of them seem to be dealing with their own issues in life as well. None of them, they've all turned out differently, but it's almost like none of them have been able to really get the dream life, so to speak, after this.
Yeah, I mean they're all going through their own stuff. It's interesting. I mean, even though that incident kind of only happened to Dave, or he was the one really abducted and taken away, it seems that all their lives kind of in some way or the other fell apart, and they're kind of piecing them back together through this film.
This was again, I didn't remember it too well watching it, but and Andy, I want to one last thing on this beginning part is it's interesting. I didn't really remember it that well either. And as I'm watching this at this point, I thought the movie was going to be about them finding the guys, but they're nothing to do with it really. And I thought that was such a, I don't know, it was so interesting how really that whole thing was just a character beat on who these characters are going to be.
Yeah. Well, I think you're thinking of a different movie, Jack, called Sleepers, where they go back and with Kevin Bacon, and they go and have their revenge.
Yeah, I think that may have been what I was thinking. Literally, actually, by the way.
Zeus, we talk about Sleepers just about every other movie, so that's why I'm like, that's probably why you're thinking that, Jack.
Big Kevin Bacon fans, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Who's not?
There was one part in this that I thought was, at first I was going to make fun of, and I wrote in my notes. I'm like, but it gets revisited later, which we'll talk about. But Emmy Rossum, who plays the daughter of Sean Penn, when she comes in and talks to him when they're everybody's an adult now. The way she was looking at him, I'm like, this seems like she's like saying, like, it almost seemed like very obvious what was going to happen with her. But then we find out later, kind of.
It does play into it. Yeah, I thought it was a little like, just kind of, it looked romantic at first.
Yeah, it was a little odd. And it also was just like, in the movie Walk Hard with John C. Reilly, they do that in the beginning where he's like, he goes, I can't wait to just live my life, and I have all these dreams, and then he dies. And I feel like that happens in so many movies. Like, man, I got all this time to do all this stuff, and then so it seemed like that was going to happen. I'm like, they're really hitting it on the nose with it. But then it gets revealed later, that there was a hidden, I guess, agenda in there. So.
Yeah, there's a reason for that look. But yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, I forgot about this. So when I saw her, I did not even realize that something happens to her. I was like, oh, that's the daughter. She's on her way to a date.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's
so-
good then. Yeah. Because I was like, oh, she's dead.
Yeah,
This
it's
girl's
like-
dead.
But looking back, yeah, she may as well have said, "I retire tomorrow" to her dad. But as we
Oh wait, and real quick, are we at the part where she's in the car with the boyfriend? Did we get there yet?
I mean, yeah, I guess, because that's right after she says goodbye to Jimmy, her dad. I tried to be good about, because this is a serious movie. I try to be good about the actual names.
Do you know who the boyfriend is? What other movie he's in? The
No.
one. Do you Zeus?
No, but he looks familiar, and I thought he was pretty good too.
He was great.
Yeah,
he's Smalls from The Sandlot.
Oh, is he really?
Yes. I was like, Smalls, killing it in Mystic River.
You're killing it, Smalls.
He's killing it. Anyway, I was
wondering.
Like, oh
I was like,
God.
this guy, because it was a little cameo, but I thought he was really good, and I was like, I know I've seen this guy somewhere. He must have like done some work later on, which I've seen. That's interesting. Okay,
it's fun watching these movies too and seeing how young people look. That's how you know you're old. You're like, they're so young. Because now I know them as older people, and for a lot of these characters. But as we continue on, Dave sees Jimmy's daughter dancing in a bar, and then later that night, Dave comes home and says he was mugged and stabbed. He tells the story and then changes it once or twice, but it ends with him saying he killed the mugger. The next day, some kids call the cops because there's an abandoned car, which is ominous to us, the viewers, because it turns out that Katie didn't come home last night or show up for work. Jimmy's daughter finishes her first communion as Sean arrives at the crime scene, and we confirm that it's Katie's car. Jimmy sees the crime scene and sends the Savage brothers to get answers from Katie's friends as the police continue to investigate. In a drainage ditch, they find Katie. She has been beaten and shot, and Jimmy and the Savage brothers burst onto the scene, meaning Jimmy finds out that his daughter has been killed, and he breaks down. This occurs as David's wife watches him play baseball with his son. Andy, this is I think from the acting standpoint, that moment where the cops are holding back Sean Penn, that's the moment from the trailer. That's like the big scene.
A lot of things about Sean Penn, and it confuses me how Kevin Bacon's character is named Sean, and then there's Sean Penn. For one, Sean Penn is jacked in this movie.
Jacked.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, wow.
Yeah. So, and he's got the tats. But I mean, just acting clinic, just every scene that dude's in, it's just, when he finds out about his daughter, you can't help but like, I'm like getting a little tingly now. I mean, amazing performance. Like there a million years I could never do what he does, and especially in that scene, because you're wondering how he's going to react, because he is like, you could tell this dude's like, he's spent time in jail and he's got the Savage brothers, and what is he going to do? I thought maybe he was going to start Blade style, just knocking people out and stuff, but instead he just breaks down and starts kicking people,
killing vampires.
Yeah. You didn't know vampires were in this? But no, his performance is insane. Just so good.
Yeah, and Zooz, as I mentioned, or as we talked about, obviously these friends have all split up and gone their own ways, and they reiterate that in this scene as Kevin Bacon's character is like, hey, maybe we say hi around the neighborhood, but we're not really friends anymore. But this is where they don't actually say that Jimmy has criminal ties, but they're kind of implying it with the way Sean reacts to hearing that Jimmy's involved. And then the Savage brothers are kind of doing what he says, and they definitely have criminal vibes to them. This is, again, just sort of adding a little bit more layers to these characters.
100%. I mean, throughout, like, we'll talk about it later, but, throughout, I think even though Kevin Bacon's character, Sean, mentions that they're not really friends anymore, he's definitely protecting Jimmy and Dave as he goes along. You can see there's that bit of he still got that sort of protection, and he doesn't want to believe that any of these guys could have done something bad. So that's definitely there throughout. I thought the what brothers are they? What
The
Savage
Savage
Brothers.
Savage Brothers. They're so well
Perfect name.
cast, and so perfect name and so well cast. I was like, these guys like are on point.
Yeah, they got like the
Yeah, it was
bolt
great.
cutters
No,
or
but you
something.
definitely get that whole community vibe. I think they really did that really well throughout the film. It's like, hey, this is okay, it's in Boston, which is a fairly big city, I guess, but it's a small community where everyone knows everyone, and that they really made that come alive. I think that whole aspect of it was very, very alive.
To your point, yeah, I definitely feel like yes, Boston's big, but this community was small, and you could imagine how they would interact and how they would, like, I'm sure you could imagine everyone knows the Savage Brothers, everyone knows Jimmy, everyone knows each other. To the point of the Savage Brothers and being so well cast, they were perfect, like I call it like mousetrap characters, where they just seem like they were going to spring on someone at any second. And like you could imagine, even though they're not necessarily these big mountains of men, they're just so hyper, and everywhere they were going, they're like running around, and like they just seem like they were so hyper and active. You're like, yeah, I don't want them in my business. They're going to do something. They're crazy.
And they make you feel uneasy.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention too, we mentioned like this is in Boston, in like a neighborhood in Boston. Everybody, their accents are great. I think like sometimes you have some of these people like, let's go to the bar. It's like they're really obnoxious. But I think like each person had like a solid, like, I don't know. It didn't take me out. Sometimes big obnoxious accents kind of take you out of it a bit. But I thought it was.
I mean, even Lawrence Fishburne subtly kind of like got in his accent. I was like, wow, Lawrence Fishburne.
I can't.
There are a lot of big actors in this film.
I was gonna say,
I was wondering. It's always one of those things where you see a lot of big actors in a movie. I always try to remember: did this movie get a lot of big actors, or did this movie make a lot of big actors? Because I'm trying to remember where, like, a lot of people, like Lawrence Fishburne had been around, but was this? I can't remember, when did Matrix come out, and when did did this pump
Matrix
him up
was
to that next level?
99 maybe.
Oh, so maybe he was already a big deal and he came into this one then.
But I mean, Boys in the Hood was like early 90s. I think he was pretty big from that.
But you know what I mean? There's like a different level though.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
He was big,
Matrix
but then
level.
it was like there's like you're at a different level at a certain point.
Yeah.
After certain things. But the one last thing, and Zooz, I'll ask you about this. Speaking of the small community, because it matters later on. Brendan comes into the shop and he's looking for Katie. Surprise, Katie's not there, and we find out that Jimmy just hates Brendan. Like, it wasn't just something. Brendan didn't just think Jimmy hated him. Jimmy actually hates him, and there's a reason for it. We find out later, but again, building that small community with those two.
Definitely. I mean, it was just so believable, where you felt that everyone knew everyone. There was a history, like everyone had history with everyone else. Whether it was like through family, someone's cousin married someone's sister, or some kid had done something to someone that kind of caused them to hold a vendetta against them. Or, I mean, there was all types of little connections. It was a very, very believable world that they created. Like, you could just, you were in it. You were in that neighborhood in Boston where everyone knew everyone, for sure.
And they did a good job in that shop there of Jimmy's character saying that he felt, or was it Jimmy was saying he felt uncomfortable around the mute kid, right? During that scene.
The guy working there, I think, said he was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But like, he was kind of saying like, I'm uncomfortable, but like, get over it, I think, was kind of his attitude.
But it was a nice way for them to introduce that character too.
Right. Very subtle, which is perfect for this movie based on how it goes, because this movie did a very good job. It was really great. Andy, I love it when things pay off. A lot of very little seeds that get sprinkled throughout, and you're just like, oh, whatever, that's still a seed. And then later, you're like, oh, hey, that grew into something very important.
Oh, and this one grew into something, that's for sure. At first, I was just like, oh, Smalls from Sandlot is a really nice brother. There's a brother. We probably won't see him much in this movie.
I didn't think anything of it. Because again, this movie gives you the big red herring that we'll get into as we continue on. That seems like the obvious thing, but as we continue, they go to the morgue, and Jimmy confirms that it's Katie who was killed. Sean and Jimmy talk about how a decision can change your life forever, and Jimmy brings up getting into the car and how different their lives would be if they had been the ones to get in the car. Jimmy also mentions having gone to prison and his daughter giving him a look like she won't see him ever again. Sean tells Whitey Powers about the abduction and that both the kidnappers were now dead, and there's more talk about Jimmy's time in prison. This gets the cops talking and thinking about a pamphlet they found for a trip to Vegas. They ask around and speak with a woman who says she heard a hello before the gunshot outside of the crime scene. Also, Katie's friends confess that Katie was going to run away with Brendan to go to Vegas. Of course, they then go talk to Brendan, who is devastated to hear about Katie. Jimmy talks to David and seems to be more heartbroken, while Celeste seems to be feeling even more emotional of a toll as well. And David tells creepy stories about fireflies. So,
wow,
this is where the crime we start to really see what the crime is, and beyond just the murder. And I want to talk to the very beginning, the first crime, Zooz. And this is where I was kind of surprised and taken aback. There's like, yeah, the abductors are dead. They have nothing to do with this. That was just to set the character up. Were you shocked that they aren't going to play a role in this going forward?
I definitely thought there was something more to that storyline when I first watched this. I didn't expect that to be so abrupt. I definitely thought there was a link for sure. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was kind of like, okay, we're done with that.
Yeah,
let's move on. For sure.
It made and Andy, it made me think kind of, and again, watching this as an older person, it made me feel even more bad for David in a way, because it's like he never got any type of justice for it either. Like they went on, they lived their lives, they did their things, and they eventually died. Like there's no justice for what happened to him in this case.
And again, I mentioned Sean Penn, but Tim Robbins' performance as Dave, crazy.
Wow.
We didn't really talk about when he first got home with his wife. He's like sliced up, and you know he's lying about his story, but it's such a weird story, and then he keeps changing it. But I'm kind of like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe he doesn't know what happened because he was at a bar and he was drinking. So yeah, but it's crazy just to see his performance, because I'm so used to him in Shawshank, and it's just like a very different character. And that scene with him and Sean Penn on the patio is porch, really great. Yeah, it's such a great scene, because Sean Penn's like revealing, himself, and he's like crying, and Dave's character is just like, I know this isn't the part where he asks for a Sprite, but he's like basically like, oh yeah. It's just like, it's so interesting and sad to know that one experience led to him being he can't really I don't know, you can't really have like a conversation with him anymore.
It's like it fried his emotions in a lot of ways. Like he can't really connect. It felt like as he was listening to this, you could almost see like he can't connect with the fact that like, oh yeah, it's a tragedy. I understand it's a tragedy, but I can't feel that anymore.
But yeah, I think Dave becomes the person you root for, though, right? Like he is the person you're actually rooting for. You're hoping that he's not the one who's done this, or you're hoping that some explanation would get him out of this. Right from the beginning, in a way, right? Like right from when you see him being abducted, you're already feeling sorry for him. You're already like, shit,
I don't think I ever thought it was him. I thought that was too nail on the head. Yeah. And the way he was looking at her at the bar too, which, by the way, I guess this is mean. One of her friends looked like she was in her 40s when they're dancing on the bar. Just wanted to say, but
to your point real quick, I felt really terrible about that, because I was watching that and I was like, oh, is that Katie? And I was like, oh wait, never mind, those are some older ladies. I was like, oh wait, no, Katie is on the bar.
And that seemed just odd to me. Like it seemed like that was just like such a towny bar that wasn't having girls dance on the bar for them to just be like, hey, let's get on top of the bar. And nobody really was that into it. They're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it did. That seemed a little awkward, that scene. That scene was a little bit like, I get that you have to do it, but yeah, it didn't. And it was small enough too that I feel like even if you were there, you'd be like, oh, my dad's friend is here. I don't want to get on the bar. That's weird. Like, let's go to a different bar. There's only like weird. 5 people there.
It's very strange. They were underage though, right? So she was like 19, right? So maybe maybe that's what it was. You didn't really quite know bar etiquette. You just saw Coyote Ugly, and you're like, I think you're supposed to dance on the bar.
Yeah, is this
Yeah,
what we're
maybe-
supposed to do? What are you doing up there?
Maybe 20 years ago, that was Clint Eastwood's idea of girls having too much fun at a bar. I don't know.
That does seem like a yeah. I like I was about to do a Clint Eastwood impression, but yeah, just like, yeah, go on the bar. That seems right.
Now this does, Andy, go back to and you alluded to it earlier, so I'll let you speak on it. She was about to go to Vegas with Brendan and leave forever. So that look that we got earlier, there was a reason she gave that look, which I think serves two purposes. One, it tells a little bit of a story, but it also sort of answers the question about, because if you were thinking maybe she knew someone was after her or something, well, that's not the case. It kind of leads that to a dead end that someone may be after her. That's why she was given the "I'm leaving" look, is because she was doing something else.
Yeah, thankfully that is what happened, because I mean Emmy Rossum, again, like, she does a great acting performance too with that first scene with Sean Penn, because I was watching it the first time around, like I said before, and really going like, man, I know she's gonna die. Like, this is so obvious. Like, I love you so much, Dad. See, and then she did do that like look back, and the fact that they brought it back and they said she was going to Vegas and she was getting away, getting out of town, and they were not telling anybody except for their close friends. Such a teenage thing to do. Yeah, it was super good. Like, what a great payoff. I'm just glad that happened in there, because then it all made sense. And then yeah, it gave you kind of more stakes, especially in Brendan's character.
It definitely is the part of the movie where you're starting to, like, as a viewer, go, okay, this is a mystery, and I'm trying to figure out who did it. Because going into it, once she died, I was like, oh, okay. To kind of the opposite of you guys, I was like, okay, Tim Robbins did it, and we're just seeing this story unfold about what drove him to do it. But now I'm like, oh no, this is a mystery. This isn't a, maybe not a mystery, a whodunit, I guess. I don't know, but you're kind of trying to figure out who it was. It's not going to be that straightforward.
Did you guys ever think Kevin Bacon did it?
No.
I was watching with my wife, and I forgot who it was. So when I was watching it, she's like, I think it might be Kevin Bacon. I'm like, oh, maybe. And then I'm like watching his like, man, he's a real dick then, because he's going to the morgue with him and he's talking to him. I'm like, man, he's diabolical.
Yeah, they this was a good mystery. I enjoyed it, but we start to figure out what's going on, and or we're trying to figure out what's going on, and Sean goes to chat with David to talk to him about the night at the bar and him seeing Katie there. And he asks what David did after. The cops try to piece together the clues, and it leads to Whitey to believe that David might be a suspect, as do us viewers watching, I'm sure. Celeste overhears the cops talking about David potentially being a suspect, and then she starts acting very weird, does not know how to play it cool at all. The cops go to Jimmy to tell him what they found, and he tells them why he hates just Ray. The cops get mad at the Savages for asking around about Katie, and then Jimmy implies that he'll find justice with or without the police's help. Ballistics come back and tells us that the gun that killed Katie was also part of a liquor store robbery. So the cops go talk to the owner, and he says the guy who shot it was the former employee named, you guessed it, Just Ray Harris. Meanwhile, David confronts Celeste about her thinking he killed Katie, and then opens up about what happened when he was a kid and how hard it was, saying that Dave, quote unquote, died in the cellar and that he can't trust his own mind anymore. He leaves to get some fresh air and runs into Jimmy, where he tells Jimmy that he saw Katie at the bar that night. This is where the Zooz, this is where the story really starts to feel like, okay, now we've got the crime. Now we're starting to figure it out, but now the pressure's on. This is like, we know there's a bomb, but now the timer is running, because now Jimmy's like, hey, I'm going to figure this out one way or the other. There's more confrontation happening between people, and this is where the movie really starts to get spicy.
Yeah, for me, I think Andy mentioned that he never felt that Dave was a suspect, or according to him, he never felt that Dave did it. But I definitely did. I thought there was maybe something more complicated in it, like not so simple as he just did it. Maybe there was something psychological going on where he didn't realize what he was doing, or something happened which kind of like led to him doing it. But the moment that they discover, the gun that was used, I think that switches my focus. It switched my focus at least to the Harrises. And then I was like, okay, something going on with those kids. Maybe the boyfriend did it for some reason, or something like that. So I think that threw a spanner in the works for me, and definitely got me thinking a little bit more, because I was pretty tracked on to Dave until that point. I know it was obvious, but like I thought they were going to reveal more reasons behind it. So yeah, so this definitely added to kind of the drama, added to things, building up and getting juicier. I guess this is kind of the meat of it.
Yeah, Andy, this is where we also we start to figure out that, one, clearly Jimmy is not a good fella. He might be a good fella, but he's not a good guy, and he's got some very bad connections. Maybe still connected to some people from his time in prison, and that that, hey, if we don't find somebody, he's going to find somebody to blame. But also we start to see those connections, that something happened between Just Ray Harris and Jimmy, and that there's a reason why he doesn't like the kids. There's a reason why he didn't like Just Ray. And it's starting to explain the relationships that we sort of just accepted at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's so tough because Jimmy and Dave meet in the street there, and Dave says, "Oh, I saw your daughter that night." I just feel like a killer wouldn't typically say that to the guy. So for him to kind of like, take that route seemed a little off, but I think it's kind of the wife's fault, which we'll get to. But yeah, no, it's just kind of like, it was definitely like a good way to kind of like spin things around in the script, because you're kind of like, probably the audience is saying, "Oh, Dave did it," and then once you get this gun thing thrown in there, then it gets it's definitely like, then it's up in the air. Now it's just like anybody can be the killer, which is kind of a neat place to be as an audience member, because now you're like, "Oh, it's Dave," and now you're like, "I have no idea now." Is it Kevin Bacon? No idea.
And to your point, in going back to could it be Dave, is because Zooz, I was with you, even in this scene where he's kind of explaining as a kid what happened and how he died in that car that night and he can't trust his own brain. I was thinking, this is kind of him confessing. I feel like this is making me more think that he could be the guy. And so I want to talk about that, but also I want you to talk about, as an actor, just the way Tim Robbins did this scene, because I thought this was another just knocked it out of the park scene.
Yeah, I mean, I know Sean Penn got a lot of the plaudits, but I think Tim Robbins also won an award, for this, so he was recognized. But I think Tim Robbins really did, a great job of this sort of like tormented, confused, just person. I mean, you really felt for him. You really felt like this guy doesn't know what's going on. He's been through some shit where he's just totally messed up, like you really felt that. And, as much as I enjoyed Sean Penn's performance, I don't want to say it was predictable, but it was like very, like he did the things he was supposed to do with that role. I mean, you expect someone who's playing that, a really good actor, to like hit those notes and get it. But with Tim Robbins, I really felt there was an element of unpredictability. He brought something to that role which was fresh. Like he could have been anything, that role. I feel like the Sean Penn role had to kind of be played like that, in a sense, if you know what I'm talking about. Whereas with Tim Robbins, he just brought his own kind of magic to it, and you're just like, wow, this is really an actor playing and experimenting and finding something in this role. So really enjoyed his performance for sure.
He was so good. And there was one line that I wanted to say, but with Sean Penn, I wrote it down. It said, like, "I know in my soul I contributed to your death." So I just thought that was an interesting line, because I mean, I think it's true. We can say is he was, kind of responsible for it. But it just kind of goes to show, like, his past came back to haunt him too, where like Dave's past, has made him into this kind of person, even maybe Kevin Bacon's past, he's got troubles with his wife. So everybody's past kind of led to, what's happening now.
it's to talk about the performance here from Tim Robbins. I think this was definitely his big scene, but I want to double on that and say I think what made his performance so great in this movie was I always call it the in between stuff. Like even when he's walking down the street, you can just see his body language. Like he's guarded, he's not comfortable, he looks like a nervous person. He never looks relaxed, and I think just those little things where you don't think of an actor being great because of how they walk, unless you're talking about Denzel Washington. That guy's got to walk that can win an award. But the just the little ways he walks, you're like, wow, like you can just, he feels like someone who has something that has messed him up in some way, and
he does a great job too. I don't know if we got to this part yet, but did we get to the interrogation part where he's interrogated? Yeah, let's Do
you want to get in? Let's get into it.
Yeah.
So Whitey says he towed David's car and found blood in the front seat and in the trunk that matches Katie's. So they're interrogating David, and he just talks circles around them, causing them to give up and work on using the gun to find the culprit instead. The savages report to Jimmy what's going on, and they make it clear to him that David may be a suspect. And speaking of suspects, we hear about how Just Ray's crime record looks, and really, from really bad to disappearing. They look through his associates, and who do we see? Jimmy Markham. Turns out Just Ray ratted out Jimmy, and when Jimmy got out of prison, Just Ray just disappeared. They go to Brendan and ask about the gun and tell him that the same gun that killed Katie was used by his dad. They also find out that someone has been sending Brendan money every month, so they assume it's Just Ray, and that Brendan knows where Just Ray is. Brendan denies it all, so the cops re-listen to the original 911 phone call and realize the kids who called in originally knew more about what was going on than they let on. Brendan goes home and finds out that his dad's gun really is missing, and Celeste confesses to Jimmy that David said he killed someone and she thinks it's Katie. And David once again gets in the wrong car, this time with the savages. Before we get into kind of the main finale of the movie. But Andy, you had mentioned something about the interrogation scene.
Yeah, I mean, so good. He just does such a great job. I mean, even though he might not quite all be there emotionally, intelligence-wise, I mean, the dude, he's got it down. He like knew what they were trying to do, and he knew he was going to be able to get out of it. Like, it was just because I'm like, oh man, they got him. The blood. And then he's like, well, you had my car, so I don't know. Can I get that Sprite? It was just so good. Oh, I just loved it. I loved it. Such a good scene.
To double back on that scene, Andy, did this make you, because he was able to talk such circles around the cops and he had kind of an alibi and an out for everything, did that make him seem like more of a suspect than as a sympathetic figure?
Probably, yeah, because then you're kind of like, oh, this guy's like usual suspects,
Yeah.
He's kind of talking circles around these guys. Yeah, that's true. I mean, unfortunately, I'd seen this before, so I knew he was in the clear. But yeah, I mean, definitely was probably like a time where you could be like, oh, okay, maybe he's like almost like a criminal mastermind.
Right.
Yeah, so funny. That interrogation scene, it's kind of like, that there's certain times in a film where you see like everything comes together, the script, the acting, the directing, like, and it's just like everything really comes together. And I felt that in the interrogation scene. I was like, wow, the way this was written and the way he's delivering it, and the way it's been directed was kind of like all in sync. It was definitely one of those moments.
It's one of those moments too where I realized how important every character is as well, because when you first think of this movie, you think it's about the three friends, but then there are so many characters around them. And like Lawrence Fishburne in this character, you could easily say he's just the partner, but without him, none of this works. Without having the person that's kind of pushing to go after David, they never go after David. Without having him go after the car and all this other stuff, that scene doesn't work. If it was just Sean, then they never would have got there. But like every character throughout is necessary to make this work. It's so much more than just the three main characters. And I thought that this scene, to me, highlighted that.
Including the two wives, right? Including the two wives. They're so contrasting, but without either of them, it wouldn't have worked. They're pushing their husbands in, I guess, two different ways, but, they're there.
And they're cousins, too, like you mentioned earlier, Zooz. Like, everyone's sort of, like, related somehow, right? Because Dave marries Celeste, who's the cousin of Laura Linney's character, right? Yeah.
Right.
Now, and Andy, this is where the real like for me, this is where the shoe really drops, where we find out that this is the real reason Jimmy doesn't like Just Ray, is because Just Ray ratted him out. Just Ray sent him to jail. And the fact that Just Ray disappeared right after now starts to make you ask questions. Well, what's going on with all that? And this is where Just Ray goes from just being a former guy from around the neighborhood to, is he a suspect? Is he what is his thing? What's his thing going on here?
Yeah, it was a great way to like introduce yet another character where you're kind of like, oh, okay, this could be another person that did it. So this movie just does such a great job of like, probably in the beginning they're like, everyone's like, it's Dave, and then now it's like, who could it be? It's like all these different characters. And during this part is where Celeste talks to Jimmy, right? Where so 2 things I wanted to ask you guys about. One, she keeps checking the newspaper to see about Tim Robbins' story. Why would it be in the newspaper? Why would that have to be in the newspaper?
Because he says that he killed the guy, so they would find a body somewhere and they would report that in the paper, right?
Okay.
Yeah, there'd be a dead so and so found a dead body in the park or something like that.
Okay, so that's what she was looking for. It just seemed to me like, I don't know why it had to be in the newspaper. And then also, couldn't she have just said maybe he did it? Like instead she's like, I think he did it. He did it. And like, couldn't she have been like, it's possible. It's possible that he did it. Instead she's like, yes. And then that sets Jimmy off, you know? I just thought that was like,
yeah, she did turn on her husband of many years very quickly in this movie.
Full on betrayal. That was a very sad moment for me in the film. I was just like, what a bitch. Oh my God.
Yeah. But that's because we're, to be fair, we're viewing it as the viewer, though. And so we see all the cards, where all she is seeing is that suddenly David's acting very weird and says that he died in the car when he was a child and all this other stuff. So as a non-viewer, you try to see it from her perspective, it does all come across very weird.
But that's her husband. Would you rat your husband out like that? And when you know what this guy's probably going to do to him.
Exactly.
You know?
You're telling the
loyal,
Terminator. You're telling Jimmy, who spent time in prison with the Savage brothers, like, I think that guy killed your daughter. Don't hurt him, though.
She has to know what Jimmy's been into. It's not like, oh, I didn't realize he did all that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, is he really a bad guy? I didn't know.
I thought he just worked at a liquor store.
Yeah. So yeah, that is but once he knew, now we knew things were getting kind of crazy. And again, this just before we get into the final part here where they're at the bar, I just wanted that moment and well directed where the Savage brothers invite David into the car. And you see them drive off in the same way that they drove off in the beginning of the movie. Fantastic visual callback. And you're just like, David, no, you did it again.
Yeah.
When will you learn?
They did such a solid job of that. Because you definitely you're seeing it again and you're like, I don't think he's going to make it back this time.
No, not with the Savage brothers.
Yeah.
You don't earn a nickname like Savage Brothers. Is that their real name or is that a nickname?
I think their last name was Savage.
So cool.
Randy
Savage.
One thing I did want to mention, though, you mentioned the 911 call. So on the 911 call, just so I know, the 2 voices that were on there are the culprits, right? Okay. Idiots.
Yeah. Idiots.
Yeah. But I thought it was funny, too, between Lawrence Fishburne and Kevin Bacon's character, how neither of them, they're like, oh, they each thought each other listened to the 911 tape. So that I just thought that was interesting, too. You'd think that'd be like the first thing you would do. But they're like, wait, you listened to it, right? No.
It was really well done, too, though, because when they went to play, I was like, oh, I remember what they said. There's nothing on there. And then you hear it and you're like, oh, wait, there was a very big piece of information on there. It was a very well done. We mentioned Usual Suspect, almost like Usual Suspect. Like it was right there. How did I not say it myself? You know what I mean? Like, anyways, it was
very smart, but just a very smart way to kind of introduce it. This whole script is just, it's so layered. And like, it definitely like, I can't think of any times where something happened where I was like, except for maybe like you said, when the priest and the guy pretending to be a cop, like they just kind of killed him off. But at least you find out what happened to him. There's not really a lot of times where they introduce something and then nothing happens. It kind of all makes sense in some sort of way.
And it does kind of set the tone in the sense that, hey, you may not get justice too.
Mhm.
Like you may not get the ending you want, which is kind of the tone of the movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But as we get to the end of the movie here, David admits it wasn't a mugger he killed, it was a child molester, but Jimmy doesn't believe him. Eventually, Jimmy forces David to say he killed Katie because she reminded him of the youth he never had. So Jimmy stabs David and shoots him in the face, leaving him in the Mystic River forever. Brendan starts to question his brother about the missing gun before beating the crap out of him and his friend. His friend pulls a gun as the cops come in just in time, hearing the friend saying he wished Brendan was dead. The next morning, Sean sees Jimmy and tells him that the two kids killed Katie and that the pedophile was found, backing up David's original story. Jimmy realizes the mistake he's made as he says the last time he really saw David was 25 years ago when he got in the back of the car. Lauren calls Sean and tells him that their kid's name is Nora and she's coming home. And Annabeth says that as long as Jimmy did what he did for his daughter, it was all good and that he could run that town someday. At the parade, Celeste is in tears because she knows David is gone, and at least partially it's her fault. Annabeth has a taste of power and she likes it, and Sean and Jimmy look at each other in an almost knowing way that one of these days they're going to have to come after each other. This was a lot to take in here at the end. Zooz, I want you to just talk about the murder scene, the big scene where
like I said, I was feeling for Dave throughout this film. So for me, it was pretty like heartbreaking to watch him just get popped like that. I thought, okay, there's going to be something. He's not going to die. He can't die. They can't just kill him off like that. Like there's got to be something that happens. He survives somehow. But yeah, they were pretty ruthless about it. So that definitely left me with sadness, for sure. And then for me, the whole scene where Sean just lets Jimmy walk away, when he's sipping on the booze early morning, it didn't quite click to me how that just happened so easily, and he didn't go after him at that point. Like I'm wondering what that was about. If you guys have any thoughts about that, let's talk about it, because that was quite a moment.
I think it was one of those things where Sean knew what Jimmy did, but there was no evidence or proof. And so he knew at least then he couldn't do anything. But I think the look between them was them at the end was them knowing, Sean knowing, I'm going to eventually figure out what happened and I'm going to eventually have to come after you. And Sean kind of being like, look, I run this town. Come at me, bro. This was my takeaway. But maybe I'm wrong.
Like, do what you got to do, sort of thing. But go ahead.
No, I was going to ask more just about that, Andy, that death scene. It was so sad because you're watching it and we know that David his brain isn't all there. And so you can kind of see why he's like, okay, I did kill her. I don't know. What do you want me to say? And he's drunk too. It's so sad. And, he says, it broke my heart. He's like, I wasn't ready. And I was like, oh man, come on, just survive a little bit longer. They're going to figure it out. But a heartbreaking way for David to come to an end.
And trying to say that to a guy who's not really understanding everything. And you're, like you said, there'd been drinking. It's like, if you confess, I will let you live. So he's kind of like, well, shit, I guess I'll confess because I'll live. And then obviously that doesn't work. But there was a part where I think I had it in my notes, because he admits it, but then there's like quite a bit of time in between him admitting it and him getting killed. Like, I just felt like he could have just said like, never mind, I didn't do that. I thought there was like some time in between that he could have had some like, don't kill me. Really, this is what happened. And it kind of like bummed me out too, because he should have just told his wife from day one, I killed a child molester tonight. Like, then there would have been no issues. Like, instead he had like, I don't know, there's this weird story. If he would have been
because I guess he hadn't talked about that incident with his wife before, right? He only talks about it later, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I think
he does.
I think that's why he had that breakdown, is like, that was the first time she saw just how much this affected him.
But I think anytime anybody would say, I killed a child molester, more than likely people are going to go, I mean, you took a life, but it's a child molester. Who's worse than that? So, I don't know. If he would have came clean and just said what happened, I think none of this would have happened. But none of this would have also happened if she would have just kept her mouth shut around Jimmy.
Been good to him and been loyal, right? No, but do you think? And Zooz, let me ask you this: was there a little bit of as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking this. I haven't really thought this through, but do you think there may have been a little bit of like suicidal tendencies to David after all he was going through and how messed up he was? That maybe he said, I didn't actually do it, but maybe this is my way out.
That's an interesting angle. I didn't think of that at the time, but yeah, kind of makes sense. In a way, maybe he knew what was coming and he just decided to let go at that point. So yeah, possible.
Did they tell us why the kids killed the girl? They just said they were just goofing around, right? That was kind of there was no real rhyme or reason.
I didn't quite get the motivation. Did you guys understand fully what the motivation was?
I thought if you read into it more deep, that because Jimmy killed their dad, right? That's kind of what we think happened. But they never mentioned that. It's not like the mute kid said, "Oh, I was mad because he killed my dad." But yeah, it just seemed like they were just two dummies.
They just said they were just playing around with the gun and it kind of went off, right? Or
something along those lines. But I thought because I thought what they were going to say when we found out it was the brother, I thought it was going to be the brother didn't want his other brother to leave, and so he figured if he killed the girl, then he would never go to Vegas. But they didn't say that at all. They said
I kind of thought that's what it was too.
Yeah.
Which felt like a missed thing there. To end the show, or to end this, I want to talk about the ending of the movie. Is this a book series, or was there supposed to be a sequel? Because the ending of this movie felt very a sequel is on the way. Was there a sequel that I didn't know about, or?
Not that I know of, but man, I would have loved to see. I would have loved to see Laura Linney's character continue on. What a crazy, weird thing to say to him at the end. But he's like the lion and all this stuff, and just Celeste's character. Her husband just got killed. Wow.
Laura Linney's character really came to the fore towards the end, right? That last speech that she has.
Yeah.
It's like you've been waiting the whole film for her to do something, and then she finally does it at the end. So yeah, that was interesting for sure.
And I loved Kevin Bacon's character's line where he says, "Oh, are you going to be sending $500 a month to Celeste now?" or something like that. It was just like such a clever way to say, "I know that you've been doing it to that family too. So is that kind of is that your thing?" I don't know. I just thought it was a very sly way to kind of throw like, "I got you," in there.
Yeah, I wonder if, like I said, I don't know if this is a book series or something, because it definitely felt like there was like another story to be told after this about Jimmy maybe trying to take over the town and be more of a criminal, and those two having a showdown or something. It just felt like there was so much more. And the character Annabeth just suddenly is like, "Yeah, we're criminals now." I was like, "Whoa, where did this come from?"
She definitely had like a Lady Macbeth kind of vibe towards the end, right? Where she was kind of like plotting. It seemed like she had like bigger schemes in mind for sure.
I was thinking this is exactly who she is in Ozark. She became the Ozark character in the end. But that does it for the movie. Zooz, you're the guest, so we always give you the last word. But for me, again, I said it at the top. One last thing. Something that didn't really pay off for me. Something I was kind of bothered by. And it was over 2-hour movie. And whenever a movie goes over 2 hours, I get crabby about things that don't really matter. I don't think Sean, Kevin Bacon's wife, mattered. You could have taken her out of this movie. It wouldn't have changed anything.
Oh, 100%. I was thinking that throughout the whole movie. I actually, there was a part of me that thought he was hallucinating. I don't know why. I'm like, he's having like weird, something issues, because it made no sense to me. I mean, obviously I've never been divorced or anything, but she kept calling and not saying anything. I'm like, maybe I did that when I was 12. I was too nervous to talk to a girl, but like she would call and not say anything, and then she would do it again. It was very strange. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, and then they bring her back at the end.
I disagree with you guys. I think it.
I want to hear it.
I think it added a layer to his character, and the film as a whole. I think it was underdeveloped for sure, because I don't remember what she looked. I don't even remember what she looks like.
I don't
I
think we ever
watched it
see
the other day, and I
don't think we really ever see her, except maybe at the end there.
She's
yeah,
at
we
the
see her at the end,
parade,
but I can't even remember what she looks like. But I think it added a layer to him. Like it made you kind of feel for him in a way. It just wasn't developed enough. Also, there's one scene where he breaks down, and I was like, whoa, Kevin Bacon breaking down. I was like, oh, okay, you know, he's doing something, because his performance is so overshadowed by the other two, until you actually see him get emotional, and actually he's, something is happening to him. He's going through something. It's just that it was a little underdeveloped. That's what I felt. But
yeah,
for sure,
no,
for me, it was important to have all three of them battling with something. If you didn't see the third one battling with something, I think it would have been.
That's probably what it was. It was just underdeveloped. It didn't really quite make sense to me.
Definitely.
That's why I was thinking this must be a book where they have more time to talk about those things. I thought at first, up until the very end, where it looked like they were going to make it a sequel, I thought really this was just a way to give us a happy ending. Was that, his wife's coming back, I'm happy for them. But then they continued on, and it was like, oh no, there's more story here for sure.
We didn't really talk about the direction, though. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, Andy, as a director. What did you think generally? Like, how did you, what did you think about it?
I mean, I think pretty much everything was brilliant. I don't know. It was just like really done, just like really well. And just, I don't know. I feel like there's times where I go back and I go, oh man, they should have like included something like that, or, different shot or whatnot. But I don't know. I thought it was really well done. And I think the only thing I did have in my notes too, Jack, was what you mentioned about the wife. I kind of had similar thoughts, but I think like Zooz said, I think that was just a little underdeveloped.
Yeah, if he came out, to your point, if Kevin Bacon's character had nothing wrong, you'd be like, oh, so the other guys are messed up, but he didn't get in the car. Life's good for him. He's living his dream, doing his career, whatever. Where this does give him at least something where you can be like, oh, well, life's not good for him either. But I do, overall, I guess for overall thoughts, I am very glad I rewatched this movie. Because again, I think I don't know I can't remember what was going on with me personally when I watched it, but for me, it just, like I said, maybe I didn't have the emotional maturity to understand just how heavy some of these themes were, or maybe I was just too in like superhero action movie mode where I was like, how come he just doesn't shoot everybody? Where's
the Rock?
Why isn't the Scorpion King in this movie? I don't know what it was, but it didn't hit for me when I watched it originally. But watching it this time, I was like, this is a fantastic movie. I don't know why. I don't know what, like I said, I don't know what happened, why it didn't hit for me the first time, but looking back, I'm just really glad I rewatched it because I loved it. Which is one of the things I love about doing shows like this. But Zooz, you get the last words. Andy, final thoughts on the movie.
Yeah, kind of echo what you were saying too. I think I was like similar when I first saw this. I just remember Sean Penn's character and me, probably being like maybe this around the time I was trying to be an actor and like was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be intense and like that guy. And like Zooz said, this time around, I really watched Tim Robbins and went, wow, all the nuances and the way he was playing his character, especially like I said, I've seen Shawshank Redemption so many times, going from that to that, it's completely different characters. And I love characters, and they gave it to us all over where Smalls from The Sandlot can be in this and just kick ass. Like every character was so good. Like there was no character you're like, and that person, like except for Kevin Bacon's wife, everyone was kind of like, wow, what even the, I hate to say it, but the guy in the beginning, the creepy guy that takes the kids, he did a great job of being the creepy guy, so it's just like very well acted, and this great to watch, and I'm glad I rewatched it. Yeah.
And Zooz, any final thoughts you want to add on the on this one?
Just that, kind of echoing your sentiments, both of you said it. It was just like a joy to watch as a film. I was thoroughly engaged in it as an actor, just marveling at the performances. I think as someone who's interested in film and interested in writing and directing, also very well paced. And yes, there were a couple of things that maybe underdeveloped, didn't quite tie in, but I think overall, especially for a Clint Eastwood film, I have to say I'm not the biggest fan of his when it comes to directing. I think he's
Yeah,
You know,
me
a lot
too.
of it-
Typically, yeah. This one was. I
Yeah,
thought was
I
good.
find
though.
them quite hard to absorb, some of his films sometimes. For some reason, they become a little too indulgent in certain things, and you get a little lost in them. But I found this one like really well paced, pretty balanced, and just kept me fully engaged. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I would have expected more than 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I guess that's pretty high. So, yeah, great.
There's no
great
guess in
film.
Rotten Tomatoes, by the way. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, solid choice. I'd be interested to know actually why it didn't win Best Picture or Screenplay, because that's what it was. I don't know which films ended up winning Best Screenplay and Picture that year, but
Yeah.
both
I'm not sure.
were amazing. Like
I think
Dumb
Dumb and
Chicago
Dumber.
won that year.
Oh, come on.
Chicago.
That's what I just typed in Google real quick. It says Best Picture was Chicago.
Boo.
Seriously.
But it said Chicago. The nominated movies were Chicago, Gangs of New York, The Hours, Lord of the Rings. Wait, am I in the right year? 2003, right?
Oh, you might have to
2004.
look up 2004 because the movie came out in 2003.
Oh yeah, if I go to 2004, okay,
Chicago
this
again.
Is it. It's not. No, it's the ones that were listed were Lord of the Rings, Lost in Translation, Master and Commander, Mystic River, and Seabiscuit.
And which one won? Lord of the Rings.
Did Lord of the Rings win?
I think so. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Usually those kind of movies don't win awards like that, though. Usually it's like Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit. There's so many movies about horses. Well, I guess there are.
Well, this is where we usually play a game, the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, where Andy tries to connect the movie to Kevin Bacon in 6 moves, but this one is already done. Do we have anything as a backup here, or are you just taking a holiday?
I picked this movie for that reason alone. We needed at least. It took us this long to get to a Kevin Bacon movie, which is insane.
Wow,
But
it's kind of crazy. This is the first Kevin Bacon movie.
yeah,
Weird.
yeah. I wanted to take the week off.
Well, in any case, that's the show. That does it for us. We're coming back. The next movie we are reviewing is going to be Spider-Man 2. And then we are going to be reviewing The 40-Year-Old Virgin after that. So very different movies. Gonna gear shift from Mystic River, but it was fun to do a serious one, a good one. That does it for us. You can follow me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. Andy Rossi, where can the world find you and follow what you're working on?
Follow me at Just Andy Rossi.
And Zooz, where can the world follow you and what you're working on?
General Zooz.
General Zooz. So thank you guys. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the show. It was fun having you on. Thank you to everyone who's watching, listening, who's clearly going to hit the 5-star review button, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. That does it for us this time around, and we will see you all again next year.